All right. So welcome, everyone. I have the privilege of introducing you to today's program speaker. Christine Emmanuel is a Pensacola resident, and she's recognized for technical writing and journalistic excellence. She's a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, an alumni of both St. Mary's College, Notre Dame, Indiana, and Florida State University. I thought I was an overachiever. No. And she's also a member of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. The Westcott Story is a two-volume historical and genealogy work tracing the author's multi-generational Westcott lineage from colonial times to the modern era through 2024. So at that moment, I'm going to discuss.
So I've talked about my outline for today, and I wanted to briefly share my personal story before getting into my family's story. People, dates, places, those are all the things that we start with when we're trying to understand our families, I think, as did I. But the circumstances and the experiences are what really lends the color to our stories, right? So my story is raised in Pittsburgh. I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1953. I was born into a family with 9 kids. I was 7 of 9. A lot of people to keep up with. And it probably bode me well in terms of the things above, which I think define you, and they, frankly, they prepare you for what happens. Each step of the way, you're being prepared for something. And I think that my big family, which now numbers about 80 people, in March, we'll have our 80th member of my little family with my siblings and their spouses and offspring. At any rate, I was raised in a highly patriarchal Irish Catholic family. I went to a all-girls high school, small. I went on to an all-girls small liberal arts college at St. Mary's of Notre Dame, where my parents and 7 of the 9 kids also went to school. So tradition runs very deep in my family. I graduated with a social work degree. And while I was studying, by the way, I had a chance to study in Paris for a semester, which is just amazing. So I graduated, went to Boston. I worked at the Museum of Science, coordinating volunteers for 3 years. We had 650 people who volunteered each year, and I had to keep their records, and I had to track them and document their movements, etc. So I learned something about documentation in that time frame. I went to Chicago for a year, did whatever, and then it was that man, to answering your question, that long distance romance that brought me to Tallahassee, Florida. So shortly after I get there, my husband, who had now been married 42 years, says, I'm going to go to law school. I'm like, well, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to go get my MBA. So we started and finished at the same time. While I was getting my MBA, I worked at the House of Representatives as a legislative intern, and I also worked for a year as a research assistant for a market research professor at FSU. And there, I began to develop my research and writing background. So we graduated. We spent, Rick and I, 33 years in our careers full time before retiring the first of 2017. I worked for 2 companies that through mergers, acquisitions, spin-offs, were a commercial banking and mortgage information technology. But the common thread throughout the 33 years was corporate administration and communications, which really gave me something to work with in retirement. A lot of communications, a lot of research, and that sort of thing. So here's what happens in retirement. We were ready, and we didn't have any plan as to what we were going to do. But in fact, what happened was we're living now at Inverarity Point, that our primary home, and I go to the library, Southwest Library, and I see a flyer that's soliciting entries for paper writing and photography contest. Well, I had a dark room at one point. I love photography, and of course I've written for a long time. So I go home, and I submit. Fine, but I want to do a little writing and find a photograph, and I submit them. And lo and behold, I won the writing contest. Sweet. So that led me to register for a 1.5 hour workshop sponsored by Food Festival in 2018. And I thought I was entering a memoir writing class. Well, it turned out it was oral history. And it was facilitated by a woman named Catherine Clark, who had just published a book based on her oral history of the Southern author Patrick Conroy. And it was a fabulous workshop. So I leave and I'm like, I love the idea of oral history, so let me try it. So I did a few. And then a mutual friend of mine introduced me to Britt Landrum of Landrum HR. And he was interested in writing his memoir of his company. And he was having a hard time getting it going. He needs some help. So we sat down and we decided we'd work with each other. 17 months later, in August of 2020, Britt Landrum published Working a Better Way, 50-Year History of Landrum HR. And it was a wonderful experience for me as his editor. He did all the writing because I really learned something about the creative process. And in my business life, it wasn't really creative so much, but I came to appreciate that. So here's what happens. 2-3 weeks after he publishes that book, I get a phone call from this woman. She tells me, my name is Susie Newcomb. I'm from Walnut Creek, California. And your mother, Christy, and my husband are first cousins. Their mothers were sisters. They're both deceased now, and they are Westcott descendants. Well, Bill Newcomb, his Westcott line, he had just a lot of archival records from the Westcott family. And she's aging. She's approaching 80 years old, and she is not going to her deathbed without making sure somebody has those records and they're going to safeguard them and they're going to respect them. So what does she do? She hires a private investigator. The private investigator finds my brother Dennis in Cincinnati and all the kids in our family. Why he referred her to me? I have a rather sentimental nature, and I define myself as a connector, a documentarian, and a family historian. That my family history is about the people in the present. It's not about people in the past. At any rate, she tracks me down, and I say, sure, bring it on. Well, little did I know, and this is about 3 weeks later, it's September 2020, in the throes of COVID-19. Nothing else to be doing, right? And this is what I get. 4 boxes of ancestral records of the Westcotts and related families that, in my way of thinking, is an absolute genealogical motherlode. Now, what would you do with material if you could fast track all that research that we do to have so much at your fingertips? It was extraordinary. The most amazing for me were the genealogical books. There were 4 of them. They were written as early as 1886, another in 1907, another in 1936, and the last in 1991. And here's a prop for you. This is the Westcotts of America, and this book was written in, or published in 1991. And oh my God, every detail about every person, that there's every Westcott that ever existed in all time seemingly is in this book. So imagine having to decipher where my lineage falls in that thing. But it was a wonderful resource, all of the books were. The other thing that was really instrumental was a pedigree chart. And I'll talk about that in a minute. There were letters and photographs that dated to the mid-18th century. Fascinating. And a lot of these letters, by the way, are in the book. Speeches, whatever. There's a lot there. So what am I to do with all this material? I think I've got 3 choices. One, I can digitize a lot of the stuff, something I was loath to do, as you can imagine. I could review the material and just put them in my storage, or I could start writing. And so I decided that I would start writing, not knowing what form my writing would take, what I would discover. I knew nothing about the Westcotts other than an understanding that the family went back as far as the American Revolution. That's it. So, where did my little guy go? There he is. Uh, the pedigree chart. My mother's second cousin was Dick Neargard. Again, people I didn't know. His grandmother and my grandmother were sisters, and they were Westcott descendants. And as a retirement project for him, as an executive who retired from Procter Gamble, he set out to do what many of you have been doing probably for years, to understand your family and your lineage. So he puts this thing together. He goes to all kinds of places. Most significantly, though, he went to the Church of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City, and that was key. So he went to all these places, and what I see in the box are like 10 sheets of paper, 8.5 by 10, that are taped together. And I pull the thing out like an accordion, and I'm like, okay. I didn't know where I fit and what my lineage was, and it took some time trying to figure that out. The way Dick Neargard described his process of doing his research is a cross between detective, mystery, and crossword puzzle. Maybe some of you can relate to that. I point out John Westcott because he is my link to the American Revolution and to becoming a member of Daughters of the American Revolution. So the writing objectives before I even got started, there are 3 things I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to approach the writing generationally, beginning with the first to come be in America, and not knowing how many generations there were. But anyway, start at the top and write one generation at a time. 2, I wanted to weave history very intentionally into the storyline because Susie Newcomb clearly appreciated the historical significance of the family. And so, in deference to her and to my mother who's pictured here, that's what I decided to do. And lastly, I wanted to write well, and I wanted to write without judgment. And I hope I accomplished both of those things. I've been studying under Mamie Hickson, director of the writing lab at UWF, for more than 4 years now, every Monday morning at 7:15. And while I'm writing into my project, I was able to apply so much of what I was learning to my manuscript, even though I didn't call it a manuscript at the time. I didn't know what form it's going to take. So there you have it. That was the start. In January of last year, I published a 2-volume set. Why is it 2-volume? Because there was so much material I had to cover. I cut, and it was still 2 volumes long. And I couldn't, for the life of me, publish a book that looked like that because no one would pick it up. And I will tell you that about halfway through the project, I realized that this story is not about just my family, my matrilineage. It's America's story. It truly is. There's a lot of history. And I put everything that I learned about anyone that had anything to do with historical context, I kind of blow them out a little bit and talk about who those people were, because young people living today don't know much about history. Imagine the next generation down the line that we're going to lose it, and I want to make sure we preserve. So the story is about the enduring spirit, and trust me, it's the enduring spirit of my family spanning 400 years in America and 14 generations. But guess what? It's not just the 14 generations in America, it's 22 generations that I trace in the Westcott story. So the earlier years come first. And also, by the way, I would tell you that I just want to explain this to you real quick. I don't need to pull the books out to do that. It's 2 volumes, and on the left, volume 1 covers 9 generations of surnamed Westcotts. And my great-grandmother, who's pictured here with her children, was the last of the line. And it was a long line. It meant that all my relatives, Westcotts, were all men until she came along. And she And so it starts with Richard Westcott, my 9 times great-grandfather who came to America in 1636. And he was born in 1588, which is why I use that date. And it ends generation 9. And Susie Westcott's husband died in 1940. And it takes you through Civil War, Reconstruction era. And then it picks up volume 2 with World War One, and Bordeaux, France, where my grandmother, who's the infant in volume 1, she's the mother in volume 2. She was born and raised in Bordeaux by expats. My great grandmother's an expat. So anyway, to just give you that context, and my mother is a cute little thing in the middle right there. How, just to give you a sense of what it took to kind of pull together a book, bless you, is first of all, Old England. What struck me that I was able to, with my 9 times great-grandfather who came to America, I was able to trace not only his paternal lineage, but his maternal lineage as well, going back so far to my 17 times great-grandfather, John DeWitt, who was born in the year 1234 in Devonshire. And all these people lived in and around Devonshire. They were known by 10 monarchs, at least, that I was able to trace. They were barons and knights among them, and a very interesting background. I only call out Lewis Stukely because, you know, the Westcott Story is about the stories. And his story is that in 1603, he was knighted by King James I. And in that capacity as a knight, he had occasion to be a temporary guardian of Pocahontas' son, Thomas Roll. Pocahontas, as you'll recall, she became a Christian. She married John Rolfe with their son Thomas. They went to England, and Rebecca Wolfe, now is her name, becomes sick, and she dies just as they're getting ready to return to America. So for some short period of time, Lewis was Thomas's guardian. The other thing is he was a distant cousin of Sir Walter Raleigh. And he had a beef with his distant cousin. And Lewis, at the urging of King James, finds Sir Walter because James wants him. And the book will tell you the detail about what the circumstances were there. But basically, Lewis feigns sympathy for the guy, and then he takes him right to the king. And what do? He's executed. So my grandfather, 11 times grandfather, is complicit in the execution of Sir Walter Raleigh. Well, that's not something I'm particularly proud of, but these are just stories that come out and give historical context. This, of course, is where I had to get to, and it's my lineage, my maternal lineage. And I would just say that there's an inverse relationship between the generation and where they fit in terms of grandparent. So Richard and Joanna are Gen 1, and you work down the line. I happen to be, and my siblings and first cousins, we are Gen 12 right here. And he's 9 times great-grandfather, and it's my 8 times and 7, etc. And in the book, rather than talking about my 7 times great-grandparent, imagine how many little characters that takes. It's just G8, G9, whatever. The other thing is Susie, just to clarify, she's the end of volume 1, and she, as I said, the last of the Westcott, so named because she was a woman and she got married. So, and we do go down all the way to my great nieces and nephews who are generation 14. And this is complicated, and I'm not going to spend time because we will be here all day. But I guess it was important for me to lay this out so that I had some organization behind the book as I was writing. And what I So you see here, these are all Westcotts down the line. And, Daniel married into the Gaylord family, David married into the Dare family, et cetera, et cetera. And then some of those higher ups, they married. And I was able to go back this far with all of these people. So there are 17 families in all that I was able to trace. And again, starting with Gen 1, those 4 families are discussed in the first chapter, Gen 1, if you will, and working down the line. Okay, genealogy is hard, isn't it? There's so much detail. It's like, oh my gosh, how can I make sense of this? I did my best. So now some of the more interesting stuff in terms of the family. There were 31 people that I was able to lineal ascendants who arrived in America as immigrants by mid-18th century, 1750. They started in England, and many of them, most of them came from England, from Southwest England actually, and they also came from Germany and from France. And they migrated to Massachusetts. 6 of the original colonies: Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And you know how the Westcotts and the Stukelys back in England, they all stayed where they were for 8 generations. Well, you start to see some movement as time goes on, of course. And they moved to, some of them migrate to Minnesota, California. Most of interest to y'all probably would be to the territory of Florida that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Genealogy is not just about the names, places, dates. It's also about the lives lived and the stories told. And that is what I think really gives life and meaning to the Westcott story. It's about real people. These are my real relatives. When you read history books, they tend to be the guys, do they not? Yeah. Anybody argue that point? Yeah. And they tend to be about the guys and their achievements. And the achievements of this family are really quite extraordinary to my way of thinking. But the other thing that I love about my family story is the women's stories. I mean, they're included throughout. It's not just the guys. A lot of information on the ladies and amazing stories and amazing achievements by them as well. My family, in the past, in the present, we are all subject to the frailties of humanity. And God knows those things come out in my family story. They were either complicit, much like Louis Stukely. They might have been victims, but all of them were witnesses to what was going on. And to this day as well, we see it every single day. I don't understand why we can't just agree to get along, but we don't. And my family experienced all of these areas of adversity. I've experienced a few myself. Virtually everybody does, that it makes us resilient. And my family really proved their resiliency. To me, my favorite genre of reading is historical nonfiction. But you need elements to give you some conflict, and God knows they come throughout my family story. I tripped upon this quote when I was writing my book, and it is, there are 3 deaths. The first is when your body ceases to function. The second is when your body is consigned to the grave. And the third is that moment sometime in the future when your name is spoken for the last time. That really, really resonated with me. And it made me really proud to be able to give life to over 1,500 people who are referenced at least once and many, many times in my book. So I just want to spend a few minutes giving highlights about some of the characters in the Westcott family. And it's not just the Westcotts, but there's some families that they married into as well. And I'm not going through all these, I promise. But I'd love to. If I have those 3 hours, I promise you I would. But we're going to start with Stukely Westcott. He was my 9 times great-grandfather Richard's brother. He came with his family the year before Richard did, with their brother William. And he went to Salem, Massachusetts. And he hooked up with Roger Williams, who was a theologian, and Roger felt that he believed in the separation of church from state, among other things. He believed in cohabitating with Native Americans is an all right thing. And both um, Roger Williams and Stukely were banished from the colony, Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they ended up going to Rhode Island, which Roger Williams founded. And my grandfather was one of 13 co-proprietors of the colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. He was also one of the co-founders of the First Baptist Church in America. And to the witch frenzy that happened in, of course, Salem, but also in Connecticut. My 9 times great-grandmother tried to have a woman who was about to be hung for witchcraft implicate another woman as a witch. She tried to get this other woman, and fortunately, she failed. The first one, of course, died, and the second one survived. And the way they determined whether you were a witch was whether you sunk or you floated in the water. That was rather interesting. And then Jen 2, her daughter-in-law, my 8 times great-grandmother, was a prosecution witness in a witchcraft trial in Stamford, Connecticut. The first was in Fairfield. Jen 2 still. This is one of my favorite stories. There we go, right there. Marie de la Warrenberg-Berry. She was born and raised with her husband in France. And they lived through, they were Huguenots, they were Protestants. And they lived through that period when the Edict of Nantes was revoked by King Louis XIV, which compelled Marie and her husband Daniel to self-exile to Germany. In Germany, they were there when members of a Protestant church, when a young boy, 16 years old, comes to the church, who himself had exiled from France because his parents and all 6 of his siblings were executed. The only thing that he brought out of his home was a Bible that had been baked in a loaf of bread by his mother. He comes to their community in Germany. They take him under their wing. He's 16 years old. He ends up marrying their daughter, and he's part of this story. Daniel dies. She takes her 6 kids to London to track down William Penn successfully, who then gives her an audience with Queen Anne, who in turn, between the 2 of them, they grant her 2,000 acres of land in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. She arrives there, I think, in 1708. She's about 55 years old. She names it Paradise, and she's venerated in that community to this day. And by the way, the Bible sits on the shelves today in the Lancaster County Library, historical library, I should say. That takes us to, we're jumping to Revolutionary War time right now. Nathaniel Sackett, he ends up being the chief of the equivalent of the Secret Service under George Washington during the war, where they are to detect and defeat conspiracies against the liberties of America. And it's a movie that some of you may have seen. I think it's a series. It's called Turn, Washington Spies. And Nathaniel Sackett is very prominently featured in that film. John Westcott, I mentioned him very briefly before, and I think the pedigree chart. History, there were 5 generations of Westcotts who lived in New Jersey, and the war breaks out, and John Westcott enlists, and he quickly is elevated to become the A captain of artillery. And he is on the boat with George Washington crossing the Delaware on approach to the pivotal battle of Trenton that totally turned the momentum around. I mean, just unbelievable stories about my family and history throughout time. really. So I now want to talk about briefly Gen 6. Okay, we've got the US Constitution, and now we have to live within that new framework. So James Diamond Westcott, does anybody recognize that name by chance? Talk about him in a minute as to why you might. At any rate, he started out in New Jersey. He was a newspaper publisher, and he would have had occasion to write about things about Hamilton and Burr and that duel. He wrote about very much about the heated presidential election that pitted Thomas Jefferson against the presiding President John Adams. And he was a Jeffersonian. He was clearly on Thomas Jefferson's side. Well, in 1798, the Alien and Seditions Acts that recently resurfaced here in America was enacted. And this, he's in the publication business, newspaper publication, and he was knife attack because of his beliefs, but he survived. And after the War of 1812, he abandoned that career and he went into politics. And 3 generations of James Diamond Westcotts played a big role as public servants through these 3 generations. Anyway, he ended up being Secretary of State for New Jersey. And here's another history repeating itself. There were contested presidential congressional election returns. And it turned out that he had certified votes that had been suppressed in 2 precincts in New Jersey. And of course, they got to have a hangman. I don't believe that he knew, but he did certify, and so he was out. Now, I'm going to jump real quickly to his son. Let's see. You can't see him very well. He's like the only person I don't have an image of, and if I could ever find it, maybe some of you folks could help me with that. The same year his father became Secretary of State in New Jersey, his son, namesake son, Junior, was brought to Florida, the territory of Florida, by Andrew Jackson to become Secretary of the Territory of Florida. And in that capacity, he was also acting governor when the governor on horseback was traveling all around. And so James ended up, let's see, what did he do? He was just on the wrong side of history. When he came to Florida, Andrew Jackson had just signed the Trail of Tears legislation, the Indian removal, and James was a proponent, and he was involved in the return of runaway slaves. Didn't like this stuff, but as I said, I wrote impartially and non-judgmentally. It is what it is, right? Well, he ended up being one of the first 2 senators in Florida when we gained statehood in 1845. And what happened with him as well? He was involved in the Seminole Wars. He brought his brother, John, who's the last one on the top. I can't get this thing to work. That guy right there. John Westcott is one of the most impressive in the whole darn line. And his brother brought him down to be his secretary while he was Secretary of the Territory. He had training at West Point, and he had to leave the West Point because of health issues. He went on to get a medical degree, and he developed a specialty in yellow fever, which ran rampant at the time. And so he ended up fighting in the Second Seminole War. And he played a big role in that role because he was a surveyor. He was so many things. The guy was so talented on so many levels. And he knew that the Indians, the Seminoles, were hiding in the swamps, something that no one in their right mind would do. And he knew where to set up the camps. And anyway, he knew how to treat yellow fever as best as he could, which, is something they were always trying to do. So he ended up becoming Surveyor General of Florida. And by the way, when his brother became one of the first U.S. senators, John became a representative in Tallahassee, and he went on to become Surveyor General. He then went on to enlist and fight in the Confederate side of the Civil War with his brother, James, his son, and he ended up moving to St. Augustine. And there he became the president of the Florida Coastline Canal and Transportation Company. And he's considered to this day the father of dredging canals and connecting the waterway for what today is the Intercoastal Waterway. He was really instrumental in that. And he is in St. Augustine, 30 years after his first stint as a representative state legislature, he came back, and now instead of representing Madison County, he's representing St. Augustine. And the city of St. Augustine built in 1880 a beautiful 16-room, it's a B&B today, the Westcott Inn, right on the water, right there in St. Augustine. They built it for him. And he had another home, but anyway, it's beautiful. And it's high-end, it's expensive. They wouldn't even give me a discount in a Westcott service. So consequently, I didn't say, but I got a tour. Okay, so quickly coming down to James Diamond Westcott's son is right here. He's the third, and he becomes the youngest jurist ever to serve on the Florida Supreme Court. And he was 29 years old when he went in. He wrote 267 opinions in the course of 17 years. And this is now, he had, with his uncle John, he was in the Civil War. And he, what else am I going to say about him? So James the third died without issue, and he willed his estate to what became Florida State University. It was his alumni. He was at West Florida Seminary, and at the time there was West Florida Seminary, started in 1851, and East. They weren't Catholic, they weren't religious schools. They were co-ed, but they called them seminary schools. So in 1907, the Buckman Act was enacted in the state of Florida, and it did away with those two schools. And in its place, it came up with the white men's college, and in Gainesville, it came up with the white women's school in Tallahassee, and it came up with the black men and women's school that became FAMU in Tallahassee. So when the Buckman Act happened, one of John Westcott's heirs sued the state, saying, wait a second, this guy, James, he didn't intend for his estate to go to a women's college. And so it was tried, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the school. And so today, the administration building at FSU is named the James Diamond Westcott Building, which is so cool. And it is the site of the oldest continuous, how do you say it? It's the oldest building, land in all of Florida where higher education has taken place. So that's the Florida story. And then there's me. I come along many, many, many decades later, centuries later probably. But I also want to call out a few other people, if I may. And I want to look at the clock. Okay, well, not really. Okay, so I have to call out this guy right here. His name is Jacob Hook. He's the brother of my grandfather, 3 times great-grandfather, Henry Elias Hook. They live in Chambersburg, which is just north of the Mason-Dixie line. And there's, Civil War's going on. The Confederates start coming into Chambersburg. And this was a good guy. He and his brother, my grandfather, owned a dry goods store right in the center of town in Chambersburg. And they see activity. I mean, the Confederates are coming in and they're wreaking havoc. And then one day he looks down and he sees there with me, Robert E. Lee and A.P. Hill. And he scurries downstairs and he goes, and it's the main square of the city. And he goes down and he sees these two gentlemen get off their horses and walk somewhere, and they're conferring. And he tells a buddy who's standing next to him, if these guys go back on their horse and they go in one direction, they're going to Philadelphia and New York. And if they go the other way, they're going to Harrisburg and wherever. Well, they get back on the horses, and Robert E. Lee takes the rein one way, and the guy that Jacob's talking to is a scout, and he gets on his horse and he goes 42 miles galloping to Harrisburg to warn them that this is where they're headed. So what do? They're ready, coming to Gettysburg, and Jacob Hope spent 20 years writing the history of Gettysburg, and I don't have that book. It's called The Great Invasion of 1863, and it is absolutely considered a classic to this day by war historians, if you will. Amazing guy. All right, let me give you two more maybe, and then I want to just continue to be able to wrap up here. One is this woman right here is my 2 times great grandmother, Josie, who Gould, Gould was her surname, and she lives in Hickory Run, Pennsylvania. The year is 1849. Horrible, horrible flood. The flood of 1849 just wreaks havoc on that community. Her father is a lumberman, and he's got lots of timberland, and he's gone for long stretches of the time. So her mother is in the house when the flood comes, with 7 of their 8 children in the house. And Josie is 6 years old when this happens. And it ends up being caused by a dam that breached, that her father told the guy, don't build it, you're building it on quicksand, and he did anyway. And it turns out that she lost not 1, but 2 siblings from that horrible, horrible thing. And then time goes on. She is now a widow, and she's evidently dating this guy, and he evidently proposed marriage to her, and she evidently accepted and hadn't yet married. And then she had second thoughts about this guy, so she reneges on her promise to marry him. What does he do? He sues her, and guess what? He prevails. He prevails, and she was fined $500, and from a technical difficulty, she didn't have to pay. Her daughter, come on, why am I doing that? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. No. How do I get back? Okay, very good. Okay. Her daughter is Susie, right here. She's on the cover of volume 1 of my book, who was an expat with her husband to your left in Bordeaux. Anyway, before she married him, she was with her mother, who had just finished being sued and had this stupid thing behind her. And they go to the Newman Springs Hotel in Red Bank, New Jersey, and Susie, evidently a guy had been dating her. He comes to the hotel one day, and they're talking, and he proposes marriage to her. And she says, no, thank you. And he comes back the next day, and he proposes marriage to her again, and she says no. And what he does is he pulls out a gun, a Colt revolver, and he shoots at her. And then she's still standing, and then he takes the gun and he shoots himself. And he misses, and he shoots again, and he drops dead at her feet. Well, guess what? How did she survive? By the steel-ribbed corset that she was wearing. And save for that experience, I wouldn't be here today talking to you all about it. Really, really simple. So I can just say that just the stories. Why is that happening? like I'm going like that. Why? So I'll just use my finger to say, the guy at the end of the second row, Gen 9, he was my uncle, and he was an executive with Standard Oil during Rockefeller's time. And Teddy Roosevelt wanted to break up these monopolies, and so he was big on the antitrust, and he goes after Standard Oil. And my uncle testifies at the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, and then he sits down, and then another woman comes up, and it's his secretary, and she nails him as a liar, basically, and he goes crazy, literally goes crazy. That was part of, that's history. Okay. This is World War I. It was my grandparents who met there. My grandmother, who's on the cover of volume 2, was a Red Cross nurse and experienced the most horrific atrocities of the injuries of World War I soldiers and of the Spanish flu. It was more people lost Spanish flu than the other. It's just horrible. And, they married and went back to where he was living in Duluth, Minnesota, which is where my mother was born and raised with her 2 siblings. And at the end of her life, I think it was postpartum PSTD, she ended up spiraling and ended up the last 4 years of her life in a mental institution. Really, really sad. My parents, the first of Gen 11, he of course fought in World War II, 3 different times he went there. My mom's story, it was great until it wasn't. She had 9 kids, and they lived through the expansionary period post World War II. It was great. That's what I lived through, which was awesome. But then things started to fall in the 70s, and the market, the housing market went south, and he was in the lumber business and whatever. So kind of sad. Gen 11, the colorful woman is Susie Newcomb, who I've developed a relationship with. I've met her one time now in Walnut Creek, which is such a treat for me. Little did she know when she knew that those boxes where that would lead. My brother is the oldest of Gen 12, who sadly, he went to Notre Dame, he got a medical degree at Cornell, he ended up at Harvard Law School. He had a very successful practice, and he sadly was murdered with his wife by his prior wife in 1989. But the rest of us are around. There are stories of every one of these people in volume 1 or volume 2. The first guy, Gen 13, he is the president and head of research and development for Moderna. I mean, these people they rock, and they're still rocking. And I'm so proud of that. The youngest of my grandparents, 23 grandchildren who graduated valedictorian of the class of 700 plus, and he's now a computer science, just started working for Meta in New York. We're all immortal as long as our stories are told. Let's keep telling them. The thing that I got most out of my book, which I'm so grateful for, is that hope, it does bring eternal. There's so much to have hope for. And we think times are tough, and we are going to get through them, because so many times in our history we already have, and we will. Are you okay? You want some water? Okay, good. Let's come back to where we started, why we studied genealogy, and I just want to convey what I personally got out of this. My starting it was my personal quest to learn about my family based on those boxes that came to me. Oh my gosh, all these things totally resonate. Developing a deeper sense of self. I mean, I was a Scots Irish a woman, and now rounding out my understanding of myself, the German and English and French, and really feeling like I belong to something much bigger than myself and my immediate family. Solving family mysteries, bridging the gaps. So many times as I'm working this, I'm like, well, wait a second, what about this? Why did my grandmother end up in a mental institution in Council Bluffs if she was from Duluth? Why? So answers, keep digging, and that was really beneficial, and I loved that part of it. Understanding our genetic traits, creating awareness, and maybe even informing decisions on your health based on your genetics. When I learned about my family, they used to have a lot of brilliant people. They were driven people. They were high achievers. They were, from a physical standpoint, they were small people. There were some really small guys in my family. And, some of my brothers in high school had to sit on a telephone book to drive a car. So you get a sense that carries through. And here's the other thing. My mom and her brother and sister were always teased about their noses. They had big noses. And I'm like, okay, where did that come from? And it carried through to my nieces and nephews right there. So I studied the noses of the Hopes, which is my great-grandfather's side, my grandmother's paternal side. And I mean, look at this guy right here, and then look at that guy right there. I mean, I don't know if you see it, but I sure do. And then, of course, I had to look at the Westcott side as well, and I did, and I definitely saw some resemblance. Look at the noses of my cousins right there, Gen 12, which I am. Anyway, continuing on, search for historical context. I mean, I never liked history. I hated the rote memorization. Look how much I've learned. And now, every time I hear something that has to do with history, all right, and then it brings to mind somebody in particular. So these people have become very real to me based on history. Forming, you had mentioned the building community. Someone did. That was you. So the relationships, I just have to say that I've done, in my presentations, I've met 3 different Westcott descendants, which is really fun, on 3 different occasions. My next door neighbor at Inner before we moved from there 2 years ago, we determined that she was a descendant of Stukely Westcott, as were those other 3, by the way. And so that was fun. And I think of John Beasley here, who studying genealogy. I mean, he just had a family reunion with over 100 people in his family and building community. I mean, that's a big part of it. And I love that. Fulfilling the personal quest, it just gave me purpose. I mean, it was more meaningful than those 33 years I spent corporately, I can tell you that. And it also kept my mind going. I mean, if you're studying the minute detail of all the stuff, it's like a puzzle. And that was helpful, I think. I think I've still got it, haven't lost my mind yet. Preserving family stories. There are a lot of people. It makes me kind of sad that in my family haven't even read my book. Oh, no, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if they've read. 3 people of my siblings, I don't know if they've read it. And I don't know if they will. And I know that a lot of my nieces and nephews, we're busy people. I get it. We really are. But people have told me, it's going to be the next generation that comes along. And they're going to pick up your book and they are really going to be so grateful to have it. So, that legacy and leaving that legacy, I'm just so proud that I'm able to do that for my family. Become your own family's documentarian, quick suggestions on tangible things you can do to preserve family stories as your legacy. Certainly ask the questions now before it's too late. I wish I had. I could have fast-tracked with a lot of things, I'm sure, and learned a lot more than I actually did. Place family stories in the context of history. If you're going to write, I really, really strongly recommend that to give it meaning. And possibly begin with an autobiographical sketch. I'll tell you, sometimes some of my siblings come up and they say to any one of us, what do you know about that ancestor who's long been gone? And I'm like, why are we so focused on finding out and writing about the people who are gone? Why don't we start today documenting what we know about the people who are here, that we know something about? Because you know what? Tomorrow, we're going to be those ancestors, and the information will be there. I've always thought that. Challenge your siblings, children, grandchildren to research and write about their shared history. My grandmother, who ended up in Bordeaux, I found out things about her based on my uncle granddaughter who wrote a project for school when she was 16 years old. So that stuff is very, very informative, and consider that. And identify accountability partners. If you're not going to do it on your own, but you think maybe if you find somebody else in this group, say let's touch base every month and see how we're coming along, so that you are held accountable and it actually will happen. My journey is continuing. This is my 23rd presentation since publishing a year ago. And I just have to thank this woman right here, Holly Graham, who came to one of my sessions, and she's the first and only person who read my book before she came. Oh, I just couldn't believe it. She read volume 1. Oh, it was really something. And I just frankly haven't sat down and talked to very many people about my book because it's long. And so if ever we have occasion to meet again and talk about it, I can't tell you how much I would enjoy that. I really would. I became a member of National Society Daughters of the American Revolution just recently. Thank you, Captain John Westcott. I have been accepted as a candidate, so I still have to apply for membership into Colonial Dames. And that is in process right now, and I hope that happens. I was very excited to learn a couple of weeks ago that the West National Society, Genealogical Society, has agreed to review my book for their journal sometime this year. And I'm telling you, I was halfway through the book, and I'm like, this would make an amazing miniseries. I can just totally see it. So one day, perhaps. And if anybody has any contacts to help me know how to even start that process, I would appreciate that. Passion is rooted in ancestry. Rooted in ancestry is a dynamic, evolving journey without end. It does not end. I think you all know that if you're into it. As I said before, it's our story, my family story, it's America's story, and we're still making history. Last and not least slide. Oh, and I wanted to get in on you. I'm so sorry, and I appreciate your attention. I have a website, and it's got a lot of information on it. But if you were to recognize any of those family names that I talked about, or even some others, I have all 1,500 plus names organized by generation in the People Index on my website. And it might be instructive to you as another source of information. A lot of information there. And this is my ask of you. Celebrate the semi-quincentennial of America with tremendous pride based on what our families suffered and on our behalf and what they accomplished on our behalf. Consider reading, referring, gifting the Westcott Story to anyone you know who may be interested in genealogy or heritage, enthralling human interest stories, the whole gang. I would really appreciate that if you think about it. And of course, if you are in different groups and you think somebody might be interested in my family story, not even necessarily as a genealogical, more historical perhaps, or even the process of writing, publishing, promoting a book, I'd be happy to speak with anybody on that. And that's it. I know we don't have any more time, but are there any questions, comments? Yes.
Our library has your book.
Our library does have my book. There's in the public part and also in the genealogical section. Yes.
What about the big one?
The big one is not available except come on over and I'll review it with you or make it available to you. Any other questions, comments? I do have my book for sale if you're interested. If not, no worries. It's available on Amazon. It's available at Bodacious. It's available in a lot of the local and college libraries. So, do you have a question?
story. I mean, I have the census things, but how do you get those stories like you get?
Well, the stories that I got started out, of course, by having some information, tidbits of information that came from those four books that had been written by family historians. And I mean, I would say, you know, I did 200 Google searches every day, digging. And so, you know, that helped me round out my understanding of what happened as well. And I mean, it's a unique thing. I don't know how I was chosen to have all this information and stories come to me. But the real source are these four books. Okay, thanks. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. So, all right, well, thank you all very much.